I honestly believe alcohol for me, like, took the lid off my potential. Like, it's like you have dirty glasses and you clean them and suddenly you can see better and you're like, whoa, how did that happen?
Hey, y'all, what's going on? Welcome back to the Stacking Days podcast, where we highlight underrepresented journeys of sobriety, growth, well-being. I'm your host, Ray Donovan. Really excited about our conversation today. This has been a long time coming. The person who's coming on, I consider to be a friend. She's truly created an opportunity for some extremely special moments in my life. You've probably seen on Stacking Days Social, if you follow us, what have you. I oftentimes post images and videos and reels and what have you from my recent trip in last November to Kenya. Nyina, who is joining us, is actually the one who put the entire thing together. So we met a little bit over a year ago, traveled to Africa together. It was a beautifully well executed sober travel experience, and I think that one of the reasons why it was so beautiful is that Kenya is actually her native homeland. So she's a very busy woman, so I'm glad that she's here. So without further ado, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ray. Good to be here. Long overdue.
Yeah, we were talking just before we recorded, trying to figure out when was the first time that we started speaking with each other, and it was well before the trip to Kenya in November. I think it was over about a year ago. So we've been back and forth, and I've been watching you from afar. Obviously, met you in person, spent some spectacular days, and we'll talk about that. But before we get into any of that, let's start kind of at the nexus of what this show is all about. Let's go back to the beginning of your relationship with alcohol. What did it look like? What was your why? And then we'll kind of just move on chronologically from there.
So my relationship with alcohol started, I think I had my first drink when I was around 14, but before that it had been exposure from like seeing my parents drink, going out with their friends. It was just like the norm. I remember every Christmas my dad would get this super huge box of 12 bottles of fine red wine. It was the biggest present under the tree. So I know growing up, I associated that with like a reward, and it was a big reward, and I couldn't wait to be an adult. But I think my first drink was probably around 14 because everyone was drinking, but it was never to get drunk. I think my mother scared the bejesus out of me that if you got drunk, boys would take advantage of you. So it's more just you did it. Maybe a guy bought you a drink, and it meant he liked you, so you drank it. And then I think later in college, it was more to like fit in. It was like a rite of passage, and I was in Montreal. So the drinking age there is 19, Kenya's 18. So, it's like you drank maybe to make awkward situations less awkward or to kiss a boy and, forget about it. And then I only drank when I went out. It was just you only drank when you went out because that's what you did. Later on, I think it was more like to celebrate an event, like if I'd graduated. And then I think it was more something to do in the evening, like as an adult, that's what you did. If you went out with friends, you're getting together, it was a social thing to do. So I think I was really a social drinker. And I didn't think much of it because at the time it was only you got together, you drank, everybody's drinking. You didn't keep tabs on how much you're drinking. And then I think probably late 20s, early 30s is when I started to drink a lot more, especially when I had moved back to the US. I had just broken up with my boyfriend, had started a new job, I was lonely. And I realized I started to drink more to silence this inner restlessness that I had. And it soothed me and it made me feel better. But I don't think I associated the two together. I think it was just like it was in the evening, I was cooking. It was my go-to to get a glass of wine. And it quiet this restlessness that I had. Because I think around the same time I was just constantly trying to find like my purpose in life and, what was I doing with my life and where was it going? I had a job, yes. Had bought my first house then. But there's still this inner unrest that I couldn't really explain. So on my off days, on my work days, I was fine because, you're busy. But on my off days, that's when it would really, really kind of get loud. And I noticed I was drinking more. And I can't say how much I drank, but I know like Monday mornings when you're taking your garbage out and you hear the bottles clinking and you're like taking the garbage out and that's literally all that's in the garbage. Those are the moments that would start to kind of like,
You're trying to keep it.
huh?
I was gonna say you're trying to keep the garbage bag as still as
It's
possible as you
possible,
make
right,
your way to
right.
the
The garbage. And that's kind of when I started to notice that, okay, this is a bit much. But the time that it really occurred to me that I think I was drinking more is when my episodes of having to check in with my friend after night out of what I did, what I said, feeling like I'd wasted another day, struggling with that conflict of um, I had such a good time, but then next weekend or the next couple of days are wasted, or I had such a good time and yet I feel like shit. Um, that's when it started to make things worse for me. And I think I went back and forth over years of always cutting back and stopping, cutting back and starting, cutting back and starting. But the last straw was a New Year's, January 2022, the first. I woke up at 7 p.m. on the couch and my sister was there and she had woken me up and she was like asking me if I wanted dinner. And I remember having so many emotions because I don't think I was sleeping. I think I blacked out the whole day. And I was so angry with her because I'm like, one, we went out together. She was so chirpy. Like, she's like cooking. She told me about her day. She'd gone out. I felt really embarrassed because I'm the oldest sister and I should be setting an example. And I also felt like I had disappointed her or let her down because we were meant to hang out together before she went back to LA. And the anger, the conflict, I had an epic night. It was too much. And that was the day I was like, okay, this can't be your life. Like, you've got to figure out what you're doing, why you're drinking so much. And so that was the last time I had a drink. Yeah.
uh yeah. I mean, I've been exactly where you are, uh somewhat coming to, not necessarily coming to, recognizing that there are huge swaths of time over the course of like 24 hours that you just were not
Yeah.
available to represent yourself, like waking up and be like, was I asleep or was I blacked out? That was my experience. And recognizing in retrospect that I was, in fact, I would check in and out, or I'd be blacked out entirely, and huge sense of embarrassment and shame that comes with that. So I feel you on that. Thank you for recounting that part of your journey. I want to go back a little bit and talk about your 14-year-old self. Where were you at that point? Were you already stateside, or were you in Kenya at that point in time?
I lived in Kenya at that time. I was still in high school.
So what was the culture there like compared to, I mean, because I feel like a lot of folks who listen to this show are very much more familiar with the culture here in the US. I'm also from Canada. I grew up drinking, from an early age in Montreal. So probably a lot more similar to folks' experience here, but very dissimilar as well because, it's a foreign
Yeah.
country. What was your experience, and what is the culture like around drinking that you experienced in Kenya, in Nairobi, and how did that segue into being normative for you as you transitioned to North America?
So I think one, because the drinking age is so lax back home, here they're pretty strict with IDing everybody, but back home you don't. So everybody starts drinking from a very young age. And then the other thing is, which I'm not proud to say this, but Kenyans are known for drinking. People joke that you can go, head to head with a Kenyan when it comes to drinking, because that's what we do. Like, if you think of any social occasion, you just drink. You go out with your friends. Starts on a Friday. It doesn't even have to start on a Friday. It's like after work. Um, People say they
Yeah.
drink because they have a lot of problems. Just to kind of bury your problems. But you grow up in an environment of that being the norm. um you say the car got itself home. You were in the car driving, but the car got itself home, and it's kind of like you laugh it off, you made it home. um the rules back home are very lax. So because nobody creates that awareness that yes, drinking and driving is bad or drinking so much is bad, it becomes the norm from a very young age. And I think as you get older, because your body's become dependent on it, or emotionally or psychologically, or just you're associated with going out, you probably do it more than you realize. So moving here, I think my drinking was a little bit more tapered in that I drank in the beginning only when I went out, and that was like a thing that I just did. And like when I was in Canada, when I moved here, there was an age restriction because I was in the US when I was 21. There's an age restriction, so that too also I think had some element of control. And then, as I said, later in life, it just became I drank for other reasons. But yeah, Kenyans Kenyans drink a lot. We drink a lot, and I'm sorry, Kenyans. I love you all. I love me, but it's a fact.
It's interesting because in experiencing Kenya for the first time
Yeah,
with you, and because we were all traveling sober, it wasn't pervasive like in
yeah,
our space. So I didn't get that.
vibe.
I didn't get that sense because we weren't in those
Yeah,
environments
yeah,
necessarily. But as you maybe remember, I spent a significant amount of time in Ethiopia, and Ethiopians drink quite a bit as well. It's like the
yeah.
same culture, and it's everywhere. So I can understand that, and I can also understand how that is almost so normal that at 14 probably all of your friends are doing the same thing. It's not like you were a sore thumb sticking out doing it on
Yeah.
your own. It was kind of just more so just what
think
y'all did when
I
you were
think you lack
socializing
a
with
lot
each other.
of other social activities you can do. Like there's times also with my friends and be like, what else can we do? Like on a Friday, what else can you do? And so if you think of the average individual doing things like going to the movies or going to, an ice skating rink, it's expensive, so it's not for everybody. So if we really think of what other social activities there are available to, a young adult, it always defaults to drink.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, side note, I mean, anyone who's ever been on the roads in Nairobi, I can't imagine driving under the influence on those roads. It's a crazy world out there.
It's a
But
it's
what
a
are you gonna say?
perfected art.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So let's fast forward then back to January 1st in 2022. You come to this realization, I need to take a closer look. I'm going to, this is the last draw here. This is not how I want to live my life. What did early sobriety look like for you? Did you subscribe to any specific programs? Did you kind of put your own program together? I know that you're a medical professional yourself, so I'd be curious what your perspective was looking at it through your trained eye versus the experience that you've had. What did those early days look like for you, and how did you start to stack some days?
So, Ray, I just finally figured what stacking days means. Stack some days. I like that. um, so I think the weird thing about this is, yes, I'm a doctor, but we only focus on alcoholism, like so alcohol use disorder. And when you have that, there's screening
Yep.
tools for that, and then there's a treatment modality for that. But everything before, there's no screening, or there's no, it's not addressed. So, and I think that's probably what made it harder for me and maybe a lot of people, especially if you don't associate with being an alcoholic, where you're physically, chemically dependent. Your life revolves around it. You're hurting others, yourself because of it. You're losing your job. So I think that made it harder for me to come to terms with it. And with it being to come to terms with my relationship with alcohol. And
Right.
it was in the beginning, the things that I would Google would just be like, how do I know I'm drinking too much? Or, what do I drink? Because I consider myself a social butterfly. So I'd be Googling things like, what do I drink when I go out? What do I ask a bartender to make me? Those kind of things. And in my research and the first couple of months of researching, Googling, social media, um, I found, I came across this term gray area drinking. And
Okay.
hmm?
Yep. I said, yeah. Go
So
ahead.
gray area drinking helped me. relate. It was immediately like, oh my God, this is what I have, you know? And I think when you have a definition for something, it makes it easier to address your problem. So because now I had something to work with, I was able to lean into, addressing. I didn't use any apps or any recovery programs or any, I call my support very unconventional because, it was Googling non-alcoholic parties so that I could feel seen and supported in those environments. And the irony of that is that's how I met Chris Marshall from Sans Bar, because he was doing a tour, and I think it was that June. I quit in January. The first couple of months, I'm like researching, Googling, doing all these things. And that was the first non-alcoholic party that I'd been to. And that's where my support came from, finding the term on gray area drinking, meeting Chris, going to a party and realizing you can actually socialize without drinking. It was awkward, it was weird, but when everybody around you isn't focused around drinking, maybe you're actually, the focus of the drink is these great drinks that are being made. So yes, you are focused on the drinks because it's so different. I was like, this is a secret that nobody tells you about, so my support was very different in that regard. I don't, even like with my friends, I don't think I leaned into them much because, as I said to you earlier, I was still reconciling my behavior with alcohol. And how can you have so much fun with this, you know, substance, and then the next day feel like shit and be so conflicted, right? So with my friends, it was also really hard to kind of lean into them. I definitely, my sister knows me, I don't have to explain myself to her. I didn't have to feel like maybe I was over exaggerating my problem, because when you go home at night, right, nobody knows what, your friends are your friends, but they may not know what you're going through internally. If I come home from a club and I have
Yep.
another nightcap before I go to bed, you don't know that, right? So sometimes I felt like I was over exaggerating my problem, especially, the more I went out with them and I was like, oh no, I'm not drinking. I'm not drinking. It was my sister who I really leaned into. And yeah, I think that was kind of my unconventional support.
I mean, I get it. I mean, I too did not subscribe to a very formal program. I just hodgepodged a bunch of things together that worked for me and got me to a point where I started just to gain more clarity, and then I could be a little bit more intentional about where I was moving directionally. So I hear you on that. I'm curious. So you clearly, and we'll talk more about this. You clearly uh, started moving into the social sphere and understanding your relationship to others, right? And alcohol. How did you start turning it inwards and again diagnosing your own relationship and what ultimately you were looking at? That you were looking at to unpack for yourself as you started, to identify how this showed up in your life. And I guess what I'm getting at in short is, what was some of the internal work that you did to kind of reconcile that relationship that you had?
So in the beginning, it was easy because I had that feeling of nausea and just I it was the first 3 weeks were kind of, I smelled alcohol. It was just, I couldn't stomach it. I couldn't, um the thought of going out was just really hard that first, January. So in the beginning it was easier, but I knew that there's going to come a time when I'd want to go out. And so
Mhm.
I started, as I told you, I started doing, looking for substitutes that I knew that I could drink when I went out. But I knew that I still had to address this inner unrest that I had. So if I ever felt that I needed a
Right.
drink, I would force myself to kind of um, really pay attention, like becoming self aware with what was the issue, right? Because as I told you, it was a period of time where I just was going back and forth with trying to find like my purpose in life, my happiness. I was, doing a lot of reading. I was self-help books. I even went for like a Tony Robbins concert, just trying to find that unrest. And when I stopped, but I was always still drinking, right? So even if I was reaching for it or reading, if I still had my glass of wine while I'm reading these books, I don't think it was really, it was like a barrier, right? And so without the alcohol, I really had to force myself to sit with it and be like, what is the issue, right? Like, what is that unrest? And I think um, emotionally and mentally, um, when I would have those moments, I would either write or journal. But it's also a time when I discovered this book called What Color is Your Parachute? Which kind of leads into your ikigai. And your ikigai, is kind of like figure out your strengths, your passions, what the world needs. And so I think in doing that homework, it's where it all kind of came together. Because it's in doing that homework, trying to understand what my inner unrest is, trying to find my purpose. I'm discovering these drinks at the same time. I'm feeling happier. I'm feeling lighter. I've found my community online. I've found events where we're normalizing not drinking. So I think emotion mentally, I'm subconsciously growing and getting stronger from that standpoint. And I remember it was like a eureka moment when I said to myself, oh my God, this is a problem that I want to be a solution, part of the solution for. I'm feeling happy. I want to tell people that I stopped drinking, and suddenly I'm starting to feel a sense of peace. I'm doing this homework where, with reading a lot. I also read a lot of books by different authors who either talk about sobriety or, their relationship with alcohol, people who have had gray area drinking. So I think my scientific brain just needs the knowledge to make sense of everything. And so in doing that, I discovered my purpose in that I'm like, I want to help people who are in my situation. It's also a time when I went back to therapy, and I think we kind of talked about this on social the other day. I had to redo therapy in my new mindset because I think I was ready to receive whatever, inner restlessness that I had. I was ready to address the reasons that I kept drinking. I know there was a lot of stress that time, with my mom and, you need a family, you need to get married, you need children. Like, it was so much just being thrown at me that I would always, I think, just drink. But now when I think of it and those things really nag me, I'll sit on it, I'll go for a run, and then address the issue. I don't know if that kind of answers.
No, I know it answers it, and I think that, like, on the one hand, you became it sounds like you've always been a learner, right? But you started directing that attention and that energy into a space that was going to fortify you, and you found a whole lot of interest, and you kept a certain degree of curiosity to continue to follow that rabbit, right? Down the hole. So I love that, and I love the fact that you've put something together that worked for you, and then within that found a spark to continue you on this journey in your own way, which I think is fantastic. So thank you for that. I mean, I think that's a great segue into kind of, you know, how you started manifesting a world in which all of these individuals, people, all the things that had been working for you start coming to you, right? So let's talk a little bit about the next stage. You find this space of socializing alcohol free,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you take a entrepreneurial step into that
Mm-hmm.
space, which is interesting to me because you're a medical professional by trade. I don't know if you've had exposure to entrepreneurialism up until that point, but it seems as though that sobriety ignited something within you that either was dormant or maybe you didn't know existed. So I talk a little bit about NoLiQ and the birth of that concept and what that looks like.
Yeah, and I think you said that right. The sobriety ignited it. I honestly believe alcohol for me, like, took the lid off my potential. Like, it's like you have dirty glasses and you clean them, and suddenly you can see better, and you're like, whoa, how did that happen?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think the other thing about, sobriety opening me up is the best example I can give. And I know when I was still drinking, this would be my scenario where it's a Friday evening and my friends call me up, and they're like, oh, let's go out. But I have a race tomorrow, or I'm in training, or you have a big presentation, or you need to be on your A game tomorrow. You'll make that declaration and be like, okay, I'll come out, but I'm leaving at 12 and I'm not drinking. Or you'll just say, hey, not tonight, I'm not going out because tomorrow I have a XYZ to do and I want to be on my A game, right? So you wake up the next day, you do whatever it is, run your 10K, have a meeting, crush your goal, whatever it is you accomplish, and you feel great about it. And imagine doing that every day, making that decision every day, from your mindset the night before, making that declaration without making excuses for it, because alcohol is going to be the limiting factor. And the next day, you just shine. I mean, who wouldn't not want that every single day, right? So
I
it's
know.
it's funny how back then I was so good at making that excuse. Like if I had a race, I'd be like, yeah, yeah. And then Saturday you're at the bar drinking. But now it's every day I get to make that decision, right? Um,
Well, it's interesting because I mean, sort not. I just want to cut you off really quickly. A lot of people don't look at life as an opportunity to show up, even in the mundane moments. Right? It is oftentimes those big presentations. It's oftentimes the job
yeah.
interview, the sporting competition. It isn't just like getting up and going about your day,
Mhm.
right? And I do think there's a disconnect, and I think that for someone who pursues sobriety, you're uniquely positioned
To
to
appreciate.
appreciate every single
Yes.
day, right? And therefore these small moments, and you can talk about pink clouds or whatever you want, but these small moments that otherwise had gone unnoticed in your experience of life now begin to hold a much more profound meaning for you, especially because of how you're showing up.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that you've made that distinction. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
because you're showing up for yourself every day. So in terms of the business, my parents are in like the business world. They were medical and then they transitioned to business. But no, I knew I always wanted to help people in some way. I help at the hospital for sure, but in a fitness realm, because I'm a fitness enthusiast. So I knew I wanted to help in that regard. So in my head, yes, there was a business idea, but never to this magnitude. And so this was a manifestation. It was literally, I think it was gifted to me. As I said, Ray, it was like a eureka moment. I'm like, this is the problem. Like, how do people not know about this? Socializing can be effortless and enjoyable and inclusive, because the other thing I remember, Ray, was when I quit drinking, going out became such an anxiety ridden experience. Something that I love to do now, I would go out. Then when your friends are asking, what are you drinking? If they're getting rounds, you're like, it's fine, I'll come with you. And then you go to the bar and then you have this awkward encounter with the bartender, because here I'm trying to be like, I needed low sugar, and then, you know, don't put sour mix, don't put, and you're having this, and you can already tell they're getting frustrated. You can see they're already like, I'll just give you something. And then they don't charge you, which is even more rude.
Yeah, they're like, let me move on to the next person that's going to order a real drink from me so I can get a real tip, and
Yeah,
it's a whole
yeah,
thing.
and it was just I felt so, like, unseen, and, I was like, "That it doesn't have to be that way, you can still have fun." And then the worst part, you get the glass and you go back, and then everybody knows you're not drinking because you have this tall, ugly glass of sour mix and seltzer or something. So, I think it
Mhm.
was gifted to me, and the idea, because I consider not drinking like an extension of wellness. So an alcohol-free life is an extension of wellness. So that is the fitness part of it, like the health conscious part that I tie into the business. And NoLiQ was born because I was like, I wanted to create awareness on the world of spirit alternatives, really what saved me, because I had a substitute. And I wanted to make other people feel included when they were out socializing. And that's why it started with a mobile bar, because I wanted to take this bar. It's a bar, you come to the bar, it's the same environment, the same concept, but you're just not getting the booze. And I remember in the beginning, a lot of the events, a handful of people were just so thankful. Even if it was like 200 people and you got 5 people, were just like, wow, thank you for being here. It made a difference. It was just so rewarding and like just fulfilled me and made me feel happy. So that's how it started.
What so you've now been doing events for almost a year and a half, 2 years
Yeah, about a
almost?
year and a half. Yeah.
Year and a half. What's the reception like? So you're in Atlanta. Most of the events that you hold have been in Atlanta. What's the reception been like from the community for the offering that you're bringing? I get the sense that it's probably a welcomed deviation from the norm for most folks to be able to experience your offering. But what is your firsthand, like, what do you hear at the bar, at some of these events when folks are coming up and maybe don't even know that you're producing non-alcoholic exceptionally tasty cocktails for them?
So I think it's a mixed bag. Some people care for them. Some people don't. care for them, and some people don't know about them. Um, the ones who don't know about them are always surprised. I remember at one event, this girl came back for her second non-alcoholic margarita, and she's like, "Somebody told me these are non-alcoholic." And I was like, "Yeah, it's like, it's everywhere in the bar. Like, I'm not trying to deceive you." And she could not believe it. Like, it's like I had lied to her. So I think that also goes to show there's a placebo effect when you're drinking. Especially those first two glasses drinks. Um, so there's the ones who don't know about it and are very impressed and surprised as to how close the taste can come. There's one who just don't care about it, think it's a waste. And, some of these drinks are pretty expensive. Like at events, maybe a cocktail I'll make is maybe $10, $11. And so they don't appreciate the cost. And it's like, why waste money on this when you can just drink soda? And then also the taste is very subjective, so they don't really care for it. And then, as I said, there's a handful who just really appreciate you being there. Um, it's I've had people who are in recovery, and one or two have expressed, "Oh, this is good. I'm okay. I drank this and I feel okay." And then there's some who'll just be like, "No, I don't want to try it if it does taste like, a tequila, or if you're trying to
Right.
replicate a tequila." But Atlanta, I will say, has been a hard market to conquer, and it's still young. I think the industry is still so new; people don't really know much about it. And the drinks, as much as they, I think, offer um that alternative, or that still allow you to be social and enjoy a drink, I think what people just need to realize about the drinks in general is drinking is a whole experience. It's a whole sensory experience. So even for the people who say, "What is this?" It's a waste of money or whatever. If you ever put, say, just water in a wine glass, sparkling water in a wine glass, it's a very different experience to just drinking water in a tall glass, right? Because drinking is the
Totally. Yeah.
smell of the drink as soon as it's a garnish you put on a drink. It's a feel of the glass. That's why white wine and red wine have different glasses. So I think it's appreciating that drinking is more than just what you're tasting,
The
the
liquid
liquid,
itself.
yeah. And I think that's a big part
Yeah.
that I still want to kind of just keep, encouraging people, especially who are not necessarily for it, to be respectful and mindful of why this is so important.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the episode. If you are, we'd really love it if you could leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcast or a rating on Spotify. And of course, please feel free to invite somebody into the conversation. If you feel like you have a story to share on the podcast, why not apply to be a guest? You can do so by completing the form on the podcast description or find it on stackanddays.com. That's stacknddays.com. But for now, let's jump back into the conversation. I mean, if you think about it, that would be the same for alcoholic beverages, right? It's more than just the liquid. It's all of what the liquid, for lack of a better term, like unlocks for you or tempers down, right? It's the experience that you get from drinking the liquid, not necessarily just the liquid itself. Like the liquid itself isn't inherently bad, right? It's what you use it for. So like I think the alternative to that, when I hear about like folks talking and saying, well, why, it's a waste of money for me to whether you have a problem with alcohol or not, to say that it's a waste of money. My thing is, well, isn't you? I mean, how much are you willing to spend on your own health and well-being, right? Like that is, that's the rebuttal to me. And it's like, hey, look, if you have a problem with alcohol and you're in sobriety and you're recovering, then obviously this means something very different to you than someone who continues to drink alcoholic
Right.
drinks. But even for someone who drinks their alcoholic drinks, you'd think that they'd be willing to spend money and invest in their own well-being, which is counterintuitive if they're going to
Drink
drink
alcohol.
alcohol that's yeah. So
Yeah. And I
um
think that's
I
to that point, about your health. I wish we focused on things like creating awareness early on before you've even been socialized into alcohol. In medicine, we have this thing called
mhm,
like primary prevention, and it's like preventing disease before it happens, as opposed to secondary. It's like, you have the disease and now you're just preventing it getting worse or managing it. So I wish alcohol had that, instead of waiting until you're at the extreme and now creating a treatment plan, or you have, options like recovery or therapy or medications. If the focus was even just like when I went out, if you asked me how many drinks I'd had, I probably couldn't tell you. But if you told me, moderation for women really is like 2 drinks, you've passed your limit. Um, it would be very hard to believe and like rationalize as to why I'm still out drinking. So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of education that can happen in the front, before you get to that point where, you know, you're compromising your health.
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who has gone to a place where their relationship with alcohol has been, net extremely negative for them, were probably on had an earlier stage to the spectrum that they were on, right? Because we all know this thing is it negatively progresses the longer that you do it. And I agree with you. I think we also see glimmers culturally where people are starting to regard alcohol differently, particularly like younger generations. And so whether or not that's because of the economy and what their disposable income situation looks like relative to how much drinks cost, or if in fact they are also viewing not drinking as a wellness choice, which is what you alluded to earlier. I think that conversation is now being had much more than it was, for example, when you and I were in our teenage years looking at this for the first time, because it can be detrimental even in small amounts, particularly when you're young. So I do think that we're starting to see that culturally, but I don't see a concerted institutional effort to talk about this in a way where it's speaking to folks who are earlier on in their relationship, in their journey, they're dabbling, or younger folks. And I think we should see more of that. I was chatting with someone on a recent episode, and I'm here in
Yeah.
Colorado, and there's a high school I hear called 5280, which focuses specifically on recovery and sobriety for teenage kids, so like high school age, who have substance use disorders. So it's built into their curriculum, right, to talk about what the implications
Implications.
of that are. But
Yeah.
exactly, right? Um, but, you look at someone who's, 30, late 20s, 30, 40 years old that, has a 10, 15, maybe 20-year relationship with the substance. They've kind of missed that early
Yeah.
education boat. And I don't know, like, I look at like my kids, they're not quite there yet, but my son is 6, and I think sometimes, like, when do I start talking to him about the reality of this substance? Obviously, at the end of the day, he's going to be empowered to make his own
Mhm.
decisions for his own life at a certain
Mhm.
point. But I think equipping him, and that's part of why I do this podcast, because I want him to be like, hey, look, go listen to these people. You don't got to take my word for it. Listen to what these people have to say about it. Then you can ultimately, hopefully, make your own educated decision when you feel like you're in a position to be able to do so. But I agree with you. But I do also agree with you that this is a broader conversation about wellness and about health, because there are so many through lines, whether it's the mental health aspect, whether it's your physical health, whether we're having a socioeconomic conversation. You got people who are drinking 40s, and then you got folks who are indulging in bottles of fine wine. It really runs the gamut and the spectrum. And I feel like in our communities, particularly like folks of color, like, we got to be talking about this, because I
Yeah.
feel like it really, really fucks with us, in a way where, like, you can just completely disappear, and we can't afford for our people to be
Yeah.
disappearing.
That's,
So that was a
no,
little
that's
rant, but I
That's very
appreciate you.
true. And I think, as you said, it's just talking about it, like the other day, this business guy was like, his success has been because of alcohol, and, all well and good. But I think it's just talking about it. It's like, maybe not everybody becomes an alcoholic, but I think everybody reaches for alcohol at some point to like soothe something, or to, you know, for a reason, that feeling that alcohol gives us, there's a reason you're reaching for that. So I think if you start talking about it early and recognize that, especially when you start to drink more, that maybe you're drinking more for the wrong reasons, but you've had that conversation, you're aware, you're self-aware, it's not just because everybody does it or because it's the social thing to do. Even like with the big the alcoholic beverage companies, they're dabbling now into the non-alc space, and I wonder how they're gonna kind of reconcile that. Do you Are you going to start creating more awareness and putting more warnings on alcohol because now you can balance it by giving people, other options? It's an interesting space to watch.
I think it's a rounding error for them, honestly. Like, I feel as though that they recognize that folks who drink non-alcoholic drinks aren't necessarily just people who are in recovery or sober, right? So for them to be in that space, it perpetuates just more drinking, period. So it's like, if we're not, it's either you're not going to drink our products at all when you're not drinking, and maybe you have a glass of water in between, or you can have a zero proof Guinness, and then you can go back to your 8.9% or whatever it is Guinness. So I keep you within the family, and I don't let you go too far from the moneymaker on
Mhm.
our cash cow. So I think it's a little bit of that as well. I mean, now, granted, as an empowered adult, I mean, you got to do what you want to do within that space. But I do think that there is a value proposition and an upside for any of these companies
For
getting into the
sure.
space. What I hope doesn't happen is that it stamps out a lot of innovation and really interesting products that oftentimes come by way of smaller
Yeah.
outfits, such
Yeah.
as yourself, right? And it's not just a whole bunch of products that are being thrown at you from the Diageos of the world, and ultimately all we have is like 5 non-alcoholic drinks to choose from every time we go out. I think that would be pretty boring, particularly for folks like us. And so, for selfish reasons, I hope that the space still remains pretty competitive, and that it isn't
You
just the
come
big
in
guys
and
who are
crush
kind of
the little
controlling it.
people, crush us all. Yeah.
And you see it happen in like more traditional food all the time. You have better for you brands that, want to be organic forward, want to be non-GMO
Yeah.
forward. And oftentimes they're either swallowed up and they're acquired by larger
Mhm.
CPG, or they're in an environment where they can't be competitive. They don't have the distribution, they don't have the price points that, they can't reach those economies of scale and win that race to the bottom. So, anyways, that's a whole nother podcast. But I applaud you for what you're doing, and we didn't even really get into it. So, you've obviously had your evolution of your business. Where is it today, and what has been like the newest and latest and greatest of what you're looking to do?
So yeah, the evolution has been drinks. We have ready to drink canned cocktails, and the story behind that was every time I'd be at the bar at these events over the bar, people would be like, "Oh, do you have these to go?" And they always expressed because they would be able to still go out, have this, and still wake up the next day feeling fresh to do XYZ. So I'm like, it doesn't have to be that way. So we have three flavors, and they were picked based off the most popular drinks we served over the year and a half before. It was a fun year-long process of coming up with trying to get the flavors right. Um, launched on January 15th, I think. And it's been 3 months of the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Sleepless nights, but I'm doing better with my self-care for sure. But yes, we have three flavors, and there's low sugar, 45 calories, which was important for me. They're infused with vitamins, again, important for me. I think of it as it's for that person who's active, health conscious, but likes to go out. The cans are beautiful because they're inspired they have like an African print, an African motif. The Amaretto has this beautiful yellow that reminds me of sunsets of Kenya that you experienced. The green is like that lush green of
Mhm.
Kenya, of that Tamarg liquor. And then the other thing that we do, we won awards, by the way. The Amaretto Sour won the LA Spirit's best non-alc ready to drink. Yeah, really excited about that. Thank
Congratulations. That's
you.
awesome.
And so the other
That's
parts of the
awesome.
business, I wanted to do everything that I found challenging. I'm trying to make socializing effortless, enjoyable, and inclusive. So sober travel was the other big part. And we had a successful trip last year to Kenya, and that's where we officially met. And it's just, creating an environment where you're traveling with like-minded people to visit a country, kind of get out of your comfort zone that you've never been to, and you know push and challenge yourself in ways that you may not have done if you're in your own comfort zone. And what's important about the trips is that we incorporate wellness sessions. So like last year, Chris Marshall came with us. This year we have two trips to Morocco and Kenya again, and Chris is coming to Morocco. Ray, you got to sign up.
I know. No, no pressure at all. Like I said, I'd come to every single year if I could. And, I know that we talked about this when we were in Kenya about Morocco. I'd love to be able to do it. So don't
Okay.
count me out just yet. Like,
Yes. You still
I
have
may
time.
be
It's in
there.
November. They're both in November. And then Rachel from Sober in Central Park, she's also big in this NA space, is going to be our wellness coach. And I try and make it fun by including like mixology classes. So, we'll set up a table. Everybody gets to learn to make a drink, incorporating like spices or, herbs from the indigenous to the country. And then making sure that the restaurants we go to also cater to mocktails. Like I'm very intentional and deliberate about that. So it's time to, I call it like a transformative experience because you're in this company of strangers. I know for facts in the past, if I was with strangers, I'd need to drink just to make myself likable or to believe that other people like me. But with Kenya last year, it
Yeah.
was
Or to like
yeah,
other
it's true,
people.
to like other people. It was a magical experience. I mean, I've never felt so fulfilled and so authentic and um, just so present. I'm Kenyan. I live in Kenya, but I experience Kenya on another level with you guys. So yeah, that's kind of where the business has kind of grown its tentacles and morphed into.
No, I love it. I mean, you're going where, your heart is leading you, and you're facing the challenges head on. I know this. I experienced you facing those challenges head on while we were in Kenya. So I only, I believe that you're doing that in many aspects of the business. And I will also say, for those of you who are listening, if you are looking for an experience, like this, when I'm talking about the sober travel, Kenya was fantastic. I mean, the people were fantastic. The organization was fantastic. The country was fantastic. I have nothing but just beautiful things to say about that entire experience. So, if you're out there and you're like, I just need something extremely new to just shake up my day to day nuance. Take a look at the trips that they're putting on. They're just absolutely fantastic. So, I like I said, I may be in Morocco. I may also go to Kenya, or I may be in Kenya while you guys are there and just meet you.
We will
We'll
happily welcome you again. Yeah.
thank you. Um, Well, look, let's take this plane in here and tie it up. I know you got to go save some lives tonight, so I got a couple questions for you. One, and you may be familiar with these. I know that you've listened to a few of the episodes, but for those days when you were really, really struggling, kind of leading up to January of 2022. How would someone outside, have known that you were struggling if you didn't explicitly tell them so?
How did I know that I was struggling, or if I'm talking to somebody else?
Well, for example, your sister or, a close friend of yours, how would they have known that you were
Oh,
struggling if you didn't explicitly tell them that you were?
that's a good one. How would they have known? Whatever. I'm very outwardly. I appear like I'm always put together, but I'm not. It's very hard for me to show my emotional side. I think I always try to be very strong. Um, but I think therapy helped me because you have somebody to talk to without feeling like the judgment or um, without feeling weird about it the next time. But in doing therapy, I think I was able to make sense of whatever I was going through, which made it easier to talk to my close friends. So
Right.
somehow in therapy, I think you're able to make a problem less of a problem, or you're able better to articulate it maybe. So even like with my sister, I think being more open and honest with her only happened because I had done some work to make me accept where I was in my life.
I love that. I think it's important, and it's perfectly fine to the answer being, I don't think anybody would know, because I think on the flip side of it, oftentimes our loved ones also feel a degree of guilt and shame because they didn't see it, they didn't know, they want to figure out how can I go back in time and help the person that I love. Just recognizing that you may not necessarily be in that position and don't feel the guilt that you may feel. You can give yourself a little bit of grace there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
thank you for that. Last question I have for someone who's listening to this, and maybe they're starting to do the Googling, they're starting to do the social mediaing, and trying to recognize that they have an issue, but they don't know what their first step could be. What would you suggest to that person?
I think keep Googling, keep researching. I think find a way to define what you're going through. Everybody's experience or relationship with alcohol is very different. But I do believe once you're able to put a label on it, um, it helps you address what the problem is. And I say this because if you do say have alcohol use disorder, you're physically, chemically, um, mentally dependent on alcohol. My way wouldn't be your way. There's consequences if you just abruptly stop alcohol. So I think start off by you know find your community on social media and Google, Reddit. Find an answer to maybe what you're going through, and then find somebody to talk about it. And I think the somebody could come in very many forms. There's a lot of coaches out there. I know there's apps. I've never really leaned into apps, but I know there's a lot of apps that kind of help with sobriety. Um, and by talking, I think you're able to now come up with a solution for it. I would say identify, especially if you're trying to cut back from alcohol and you associated it with certain things, identify those things that you associate the drinking with, and then be prepared for those moments. So for me, if it was going out for dinner, like now I love my cans, I'll just take my Nolik can. It's 8.4, put it in my purse. I know I'm good for the night. If we're going to the club, I may take a bottle of something in my handbag. I'm not pissing in the bar, you know, with my bottle from my purse. If I'm going to be around people, my friends who drink, I know I'll say by midnight, I'm done. Or, I'll just choose not to go. And that's one of the things I think you have to come to terms with. It's like a process of natural selection. You kind of select and they select you. But it's finding the times that you're going to feel most triggered. Or and maybe you're not triggered, just at times you associate with drinking. Like if it's in the house on your own, feeling lonely, it's like find something else to silence that noise, whether it's investing in a hobby, whether it's reading, writing, journaling. Again, in the house, I love mixing drinks, especially in those moments when I'm feeling for a drink, because you can have so much fun with them. Make it bitter, make it sweet, make nonsense out of it. But it's filling in the times that I knew I'd want to drink. And I think lastly, identifying what the problem is, what you're trying to soothe with the alcohol. And not everybody may be soothed, but I think that's a big part that you may not realize you drink. Because Ray, there's times that I miss that part of me that would drink. It's like this carefree person, who wasn't a doctor, wasn't an overachiever. The state of mind that I loved, and I sometimes miss it. But it's identifying what it is about those moments and really trying to work on, that nagging feeling. What is it?
Yeah. I mean, it really is an opportunity for deep self-reflection, but in order but it takes some getting used to in order to reflect deeply about oneself. It doesn't just come, overnight, but when you start asking the questions, you can start building up the muscle, so that it can come a little bit easier. But you're right, and I felt this as well. It's like, oh my God, I wish could be that guy. But I realized that guy, even though, maybe 7 out of 10 times it
Yeah.
didn't turn into a problem, there were 3 times where it turned into a real problem, and you never really knew how far that real problem was going to go. Which, in my mind, when you run that opportunity, that cost analysis, it makes a lot
To
of
stay
sense to
away.
just leave it alone and figure out
Yeah,
to stay away. Yeah.
for sure.
Well, yeah. Well, look, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for finally, agreeing to come on, accepting my invite, and sharing your journey and all the beautiful things that you're doing, today. I just really do really, appreciate what you do and love watching it and love being a part of, your community. So thank
Thank
you
you
so
for having
much.
me, Ray, and for your patience. I knew I'd come on someday. I made it.
Yeah. Well, look. Hopefully, I'm in Morocco in November, and we can chat it up some more in
Yes,
person. That'd be pretty
sir.
cool.
Thank you.
Awesome. You got it. Well, everyone, thank you guys for joining in on this episode. We'll be back next week with our final episode of the season. So I'll have some thoughts that I'll share with the broader community. But until then, please be well one day at a time. Peace. I appreciate you guys listening to the Stacking Days podcast. I hope this episode added value to your recovery and wellness journey. Before we go our separate ways, let's connect on social. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram at Stacking Days or via the website www.stackingdays.com. By supporting the show, you can play a direct role in amplifying people of color in their pursuit of recovery. The easiest way to do that is to subscribe or hit the follow button. This way, you'll never miss an episode, all while playing an active part in creating the ecosystem where diverse voices and healing matter. This show is for the purpose of education and connection and is not a replacement for therapy or recovery care. For more information on the resources and support available, take a look at SAMHSA and some other resources shared in the description. Until we meet again, be well, one day at a time.